Hi and welcome back to my channel. I'm back with another episode of Recent Reads. I'm not doing it as a vlog. I had a slow start to my reading this week. That tends to usually happen when I do something like Peace Talks and read 8 books in one weekend, or maybe it was more than that. I think I read 8 graphic novels and I had a couple audiobooks. But anyway, that next day I didn't feel like reading, and then it took until Tuesday until I finished something, so I wouldn't have started updating until Wednesday, and then I just never ended up updating. I got kind of wrapped up in other things, and as I start this, the battery has decided to blink, so I'll be back in a minute. So I have a few less books to talk about than the previous weeks, but I still have several books to talk about. I have 6 books to talk about here, which is pretty good. For most people, that would be a lot read in a week, but for me, yeah, I read too much. All right, let's start off with the book that I was reading on Sunday. Could have finished on Sunday, didn't finish on Sunday, and ended up not finishing until Tuesday, and that is All Systems Red by Martha Wells. This is book 1 in the Murderbot series, a well-beloved series. The main character in this series is a murderbot. They are not fully human, they're a construct. They have biological and robot parts put together. They're not supposed to be able to think for themselves, but Murderbot themselves has a broken governor, meaning they can make their own decisions. They don't really like interacting with people. They like watching basically soap operas on their own systems, the downloads. And then so it ends up that Murderbot gets sent out on these various contracts because they are owned by a particular company and they contract out their SEC units. I think SEC is the company. I don't remember exactly because I didn't read it physically. So in this book, you have an incident happening where they're going to this planet. They're trying to find out certain things about the planet, I think to terraform it. And there's something that happens where they encounter this really dangerous plant and they nearly die, and that starts the dominoes for this particular plot. And in this book, it is so short. It's about 150 pages. So somehow, in such a short book, Martha Wells is able to create characters that you are able to empathize with. Not just Murderbot, from whose perspective this book is told, but also the humans that Murderbot works with. And Murderbot sort of detaches themselves from all of these other people that they work with. And yet you can tell that they're growing close to these certain humans, that they want to take care of them. And somehow Martha Wells is able to get you to want to care about these characters as well. And the way that it leaves off at the end, I'm so excited to continue picking up books, novellas in this series. In my review, I described this as reading like an episode of Doctor Who, not with the timey-wimey stuff, but with this heartfelt sci-fi adventure spirit. This is like an episode of TV, so I really enjoyed this one. So speaking of sci-fi, we next have Fox Snare by Yoon Ha Lee. This is the 3rd book in the Thousand Kingdoms trilogy. At first, my expectation for this was a little bit elevated and then not met because it's described as the conclusion to this thrilling series. But I remember when I first read Dragon Pearl, the first book in this series, that I thought it was a standalone. And I think originally it was supposed to be a standalone. Each of these books, so you've got Dragon Pearl first, you've got Tiger Honor second, which I read earlier this year, and then you've got Fox Snare to conclude it. Each of them can stand on their own. Now, there are other bits that you learn about each of these characters in the previous installments, but there's not an overall macro plot. There's things that connect it overall macro-wise, but there's not one driving thing that they're trying to resolve. At first, when I was reading it, I was expecting this grand conclusion to things that had been built up earlier in the series, but that's not what you get, because I don't think that's what Yoon Ha Lee intended with these. I think Yoon Ha Lee intended for these books to be exactly what they are. They are standalone adventures that are connected. When I sort of reframed my thoughts about these, and that happened when I was writing the review, my perspective on this book and my experience with it elevated. And in the synopsis, it says that they're trying to survive on this planet that needs to be terraformed. That actually doesn't happen until 50% through the actual plot of the book. And I think the synopsis did this book a disservice as well, because there's a whole lot that happens in the first 50% of the book. A lot of laying the groundwork for character development and bringing things together and things like that. But ultimately, this series, I think, could continue if Yoon Ha Lee wanted to write more books in this series. The way that it left off was not like this, okay, everything's wrapped up, and if I tack things on, then I'm going to be damaging my series, like sometimes happens with some authors. I think there could continue to be a series of connected standalones to this. So I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the growth in the relationship between Min and Sabine, or Sebin. I don't actually know how that's pronounced. And the way that the characters themselves developed. And I thought it was an excellent conclusion to the series, even though it wasn't a conclusion in the sense that there was an overall macro plot. The next book that I read, it took me a while to read. I started reading it via ebook, even though I had the physical copy, because I got myself a stand and a clicker for my Kindle. Yes, it's a trend. I like the trend. It makes it easy to read. And then I wasn't getting into it, and I wanted to finish it. So I like, you know what? I have the audiobook. Let me just finish this as audio. I think I'll be able to read through it quicker. And that is Magpie Murders by Anthony Horowitz. I was gonna give this a try to see how far or where in the genre of mystery were my limits of enjoyment. And I think I found one of those limits of enjoyment. So in Magpie Murders, it's a unique setup because you have a book within a book. So you have this author who is like a modern-ish day Agatha Christie, but a man. Alan Conway, I think is his name. And he has written a series of novels, the Atticus Pound novels, and he delivers this last novel, and some chapters are missing in it, and then he's discovered dead from an apparent suicide. Most of the first part of the book is his editor, Susan Ryland, reading Magpie Murders. And so at first I was like casually interested in that, but as it's going along, I'm realizing this is very much like Agatha Christie. I have thought in the past, maybe I need to give Agatha Christie another try. I read several Agatha Christie books many years ago, and I didn't like them. They seemed way too formulaic, and the answers seemed to come out of the blue. And I thought, well, maybe now that I've watched other reviewers, their take on Agatha Christie, and seen them enjoy that, maybe I need to tackle that again. After reading this, no, this is not Agatha Christie. But that style, I was just like, you know what? I probably would be fine with them, but they wouldn't be my favorite thing to read. So am I gonna bother with this again? I don't think so. Then it shifts because you've got the book within the book. Once it turns out that, you know, Alan Conway is dead, Susan Ryland is trying to find the missing chapters. And as she tries to find these missing chapters, more and more she starts thinking, was he actually murdered? Now, he wasn't a likable guy, so no one really wants her to follow up and try to solve the crime. So the second half of it is that, and I liked that less because the character of Ryland is just not someone that I really can empathize with or find any sort of commonality in it. And it's just this, it's not that there's anything wrong with it. She's not an unlikable character. It's just that sort of situation and the way that she's built her life. I just am kind of like, I'm not really drawn to empathize with her, be in her shoes, figure out her motives, why she's acting the way that she's doing. It just ultimately wasn't a lot of fun for me, and it helped me figure out my murder mystery taste. I'm going to get to another mystery in a little bit that's more to my taste. The next book that I read, and I read it very quickly, I read it on Friday, and that is Hereafter by Amy Lynn. This is one of the Book of the Month books that I got this month, I believe. It is a grief memoir, and it's written in vignettes. So it read very quickly. I read this in about 2 hours, give or take half an hour. And in this book, Amy Lynn is talking about her experience of losing her husband. He was only 32 when he died. It was August-ish in 2020, and he went out with the rest of their family. She couldn't because she had fallen and hurt her knee, and to do a virtual half marathon. And then all of a sudden they find him, he's collapsed, he's dead. The thing is, they never figure out why, because he was a completely healthy person. And so this is a grief memoir, and she's going through some of the time is remembering when they were getting together, some of their earlier dates, some of their conflicts together. There's a lot of introspection on herself personally, and it's very hard-hitting. It's very sad, very emotionally moving. It's not something that has all the answers, that is trying to preach at people. In this book, I can see that what Lynn was doing was laying open the table for, hey, if you also are struggling with grief and have no answers, come here, I will listen to you. Just the mere fact of being listened to can do so much for people, and this was just well worth the read. So now, speaking of murder mystery, a murder mystery that worked better for me, this is also a book that I got in March, and that is The Tainted Cup. Now, I also had an ARC copy, so that will help with that. The Tainted Cup is the first in a new mystery series, fantasy mystery series by Robert Jackson Bennett. I'm reading the first book in his Founderside trilogy next month in April, which, I mean, it'll be April when this goes up because tomorrow is April. This book is a lot more gory and hard-hitting and rough around the edges than I expected. But in this world, you have a magic system where there's leviathans, these big old monsters that come out of the sea and they damage things, but also they've been able to isolate some of their magic, some of them, to refine and create different sort of enhancements. And there's different layers of things that can be, and they're used in different ways around the empire. And the main character, Din, is an apprentice. He's still serving out his apprenticeship to this investigator who is very rough around the edges and not someone that people like, but she's brilliant. Her name's Anna. And Din is what's called an engraver. He has been enhanced so that he remembers absolutely everything. And the way that they operate is they'll bring around different vials of different smells, and so that he can pull up these memories, specific memories, because if he remembers everything, he's going to need to sort through somehow. He will, when he's going, investigating and looking up and trying to remember different things, he'll bring these vials, he'll sniff them as he's going around and making note of things. Well, he is a little self-conscious because he has done something not necessarily straightforward to become an apprentice, to become an engraver, because he has immense difficulty with reading and writing. It's probably a fantastical version of dyslexia, because he talks about how like all the characters and stuff will just like dance around in his vision. At the beginning of the book, you have this murder occur that's rather grotesque. It's the fact that this official high up in the military is at this country home to this gentry family that's very influential. A tree erupted through him, killing him, obviously. And they have to figure out what's going on. The way that the plot blooms from there and becomes so much larger than that, becomes not necessarily empire-wide, but it might, is phenomenal. I loved it. I loved the quirks of the main investigator, Anna. I loved the way that the mystery was involving the fantastical elements as well. There's a lot of this that reads like straightforward detective procedural mystery, very similar to Magpie Murders. But at the same time, you've got the fantastical element. And I think that's something that I can hook onto as to the part that I like about the mystery, when it's not just the procedural detective mystery. It's got another aspect to it. And the way that this was done is absolutely fantastic. And I'm so excited to read more in this series and to read more by Robert Jackson Bennett. And the last book that I have to talk about, I do not have a physical copy of, but now both my mom and I have read it in very short succession because it's a short book, and that is Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond. I have wanted to read this for a while. I wasn't necessarily going to read it this month, but then I realized I really do want to keep up with my goal of reading 2 nonfiction per month. I don't get any bonus points for Realmathon for this. I need to add up my points. I haven't been going through talking about my points on these. So for this, the bonus point that I'm going to get is a person on the cover. I'm not going to get any page count bonuses. For this, obviously I'm going to get person on the cover. I might get 1 set of page count bonuses. For this, I'm going to get red on the cover. I'm not going to get person on the cover. And I'm definitely going to get some page count bonuses. For this, I'm going to get red, the red color, and person on the cover. And then for this, I think I'm going to count that as 51% because this takes up a huge point. So I might get not person on the cover because there's no person on here, just a lot of mushrooms. So we'll see about that one. But I'm definitely going to get page count bonuses for that one. For Poverty by America, I'm not going to get any of those because the cover is all black and just the text Poverty by America and then the author's name. Not going to get person on the cover, not going to get color. The way that Matthew Desmond writes is very well done. But before I get into the book itself, I do want to note that for both the audiobook of Evicted, which my mom picked up after reading this one, and for Poverty by America, the producer of the audiobook chose to have a black man narrate these books. Matthew Desmond is not black, he's white. And I found that very interesting. As I'm listening, I'm like, that is an interesting choice to make. To have Matthew Desmond, maybe he's not a great narrator, and that's totally fine that he's not narrating his own book, but the choice of narrator for this, I did find interesting. And I wonder what that says about what they're going for with the production of these audiobooks. But the narrator is phenomenal. I loved listening to him. In Poverty by America, which is fairly short, I believe it won. No, it didn't. It was The Wager won the nonfiction category. Poverty by America was pretty high up though. He's talking about the systemic issues with poverty and why poverty in America, this fully developed country with the biggest economy in the world, has rates of poverty, however you break it down, that are so different than and so much worse than every other developed country in the world. And sometimes these different rates equate what we would think of as incredibly poor countries. And it's short and it's to the point. It's not deep in the research, but the way that he writes, it packs a punch. And it was definitely worth the read. So there you go. There are the 6 books that I read this past week to finish out March. I haven't gone through and tallied up all of the books that I read this month, but it is over 40. I don't think I got to 50, which is totally fine. That's not what a reasonable person would do. Who said I was reasonable? We'll see what April holds in store and if I can keep up my reading mojo. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.